2003 is one of those years in WWE history that looks very strange when viewed with a bit of hindsight. It was very much a transitional year. The Ruthless Aggression era was still in its infancy, whilst a few vestiges of the Attitude era clung on for dear life. This meant that you got shows like WrestleMania 19, with huge matches like Shawn Michaels vs Chris Jericho, Brock Lesnar vs Kurt Angle, and Stone Cold vs The Rock all happening on the same night. 2003 was so star-studded it can therefore be easy to overlook some of the bad stuff that went down in this topsy-turvy year. Easy, but not impossible. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE matches of 2003. Join us! Number 10, Goldberg vs Triple H at Survivor Series. WCW didn't get everything right, just ask anyone who was mad enough to still be watching Nitro in 2000, but one thing they excelled at was the initial rise of Goldberg. The company knew his limits and never pushed him above them, booking him in short, explosive matches that showcased his immense power and speed. WWE had the perfect blueprint for Billy when he started for them in 2003. Did they bother to use it though? Did they balls? The company was for some reason dead set on putting Goldberg in longer matches that exposed his flaws rather than hiding them. Perhaps the worst example of this philosophy came at the 2003 Survivor Series, where Goldberg met Triple H in a World Heavyweight Championship defense. The champion just could not work the WWE big match style, leading to a flat, dull, drawn-out slog of a bout that only got interesting when Evolution made a run-in. It was also a very flat end to a very wacky and eventful pay-per-view, main eventing after Kane vs Shane McMahon, Vince literally burying The Undertaker, and a Shawn Michaels performance for the ages. Number 9, the APA Invitational Barroom Brawl at Vengeance. When they weren't always pounding ass, Bradshaw and Farouk loved nothing more than a bar fight. They loved a bar fight so much that they decided to host a huge one at Vengeance and invite all their friends along. Their friends included the Brooklyn Brawler, Brother Love, Doink the Clown, and the Easter Bunny, by the way. Those last two were played by Nick Eugene Dinsmore and the future Damien Sandow. Does that make this match any better? Not one tiny bit. In fact, the very word match is a loose description here. This was 20 or so guys in a fake pub smashing the wee-wee out of one another for 4.5 minutes. If you lean more toward the chaotic side of life, then you might get something out of this bizarre spectacle. But if you like your wrestling to have, wrestling in it, then you will sit there wondering why anyone thought this was a good use of pay-per-view time. Oh, Bradshaw won, by the way, in case any of you cared. Number 8, Sable vs Stephanie McMahon at Vengeance. Remember when Vince McMahon traumatized his daughter by openly cheating on her comatose mother in the build-up to WrestleMania X7? Remember when he did the exact same thing again with Sable just a few years later? Poor Steph. Much like she had done with Trish Stratus in 2001, Stephanie took on her father's mistress at Vengeance in a no-countout match. The $1 Billion Princess was never a great wrestler or anything, but we've seen her do pretty well when paired with the right opponent. Sable was not the right opponent. They fumbled around both inside and outside the ring, hitting offense that could be best described as hopeful. The moment you might remember came when A-Train interfered on Sable's behalf, absolutely flattening Stephanie with a run-in to give the Wildcat the win. If the sloppy wrestling wasn't enough to get this match on the list, then the sight of a giant hairy man running down a 26-year-old woman definitely did the trick. And by the way, this is far from the worst thing that Vince put his daughter through in 2002. More on that later. Number 7, Torrie Wilson vs Dawn Marie Wilson at Royal Rumble. Depending on how ironically you enjoy wrestling, the storyline between Dawn Marie, Torrie Wilson, and Torrie's father Al is either the worst or best thing to ever happen. Recently divorced, Mr. Wilson found himself romantically involved with his daughter's co-worker. Despite repeated attempts to call the relationship off, Dawn and Al got hitched on an episode of SmackDown, in their pants. Why have I never been invited to this sort of wedding? Married life got off to a rocky start when Al died in kayfabe. The reason for his passing? Too much badonka-donking. What a way to go. This led to a match between stepmother and stepdaughter at the Royal Rumble. Unfortunately, a storyline that involved death descended into the usual women's fodder of the time. Badly executed moves, hair pulling, steamrolling the ref, you know the stuff. The fact that all of this was going on while Michael Cole and Taz were trying to seriously convey the grief that both women supposedly felt just made everything so much worse. Or better if you're a sicko like me. Number 6, Shane McMahon versus Eric Bischoff at SummerSlam. Eric Bischoff has done some pretty despicable things. He helped form the NWO, tried to run TNA into the ground, and gave the world the Kiss Demon, but few of his actions were as viscerally upsetting as the time he forced himself on Linda McMahon in 2003. By the way, that means that Bischoff has kissed both the wife and daughter of his ultimate business rival. Wrestling's weird, isn't it? This infraction led to Eazy-E taking on Shane McMahon at SummerSlam. As non-wrestlers go, Shane was among the most entertaining in his prime. As for Eric, let's just say he's a better podcaster than worker. The presence of Bischoff's lackey, Jonathan Coachman, didn't help matters as he teamed up with his boss to lay waste to the young McMahon. Did we also need him doing solo commentary on a live mic the entire time? This train wreck was thankfully halted when Steve Austin made the save, allowing Shane O'Mac to brutalize his opponent with an elbow drop through the announcer's desk. Whilst it was nice to see Eric get his comeuppance, this was absolutely not the way to go about it. Number 5, Triple H versus Kevin Nash at Judgment Day. The Clique have had some great moments together. This group of real-life buddies often had great matches against one another, pulling together to get the best possible result every time they stepped in the ring. Well, not every time. Case in point, this World Heavyweight Championship match between Triple H and his good time boy Kevin Nash at Judgment Day 2003. These two were perhaps the Clique members least suited to working together. The two friends had a lumbering, plodding affair that saw the referee get battered just as much as the competitors. Seriously, Earl Hebner takes one hell of a beating in this match, including a damn sledgehammer shot. This finally got the match thrown out, which fans might have reacted more strongly to if they weren't so relieved that it was finally over. Number 4, Mr. America versus Roddy Piper at Judgment Day. Immediately before the previous match, fans were treated to yet another opportunity to go to the bathroom when Rowdy Roddy Piper went head-to-head with Mr. America. For reasons that would take far too long to explain, Hulk Hogan was hiding out under his best Captain America cosplay to avoid getting fired by Vince McMahon. This led to a match with his old rival, Rowdy Roddy Piper. Hogan vs. Piper was the rivalry that helped make the first WrestleMania such a success, but that was in 1985. Close to 20 years before this encounter took place. Instead of an industry shifter, we got a sorry state of a match between two men for whom the phrase "seen better days" was sadly very much appropriate. The middle-aged legends threw punches and, well, they threw punches, that's basically all they did. Sean O'Haire got involved a bunch, remember when Sean O'Haire was Piper's running buddy, accidentally costing the Hot Rod by bashing in his skull with a lead pipe. Mr. America won, and this entire ridiculous saga would roll on until Hulk Hogan left the company a month later. Nice to see this was all worth it then. Number 3, Triple H versus Scott Steiner at No Way Out. When Scott Steiner appeared at Survivor Series 2002, fans were ecstatic. While he had been in WWE before alongside his brother Rick, this was a very different man. This was a former WCW champion, Freakzilla, the big bad booty daddy. And then he asked for an effing mic, and the rest of his WWE run went downhill from there. The world's angriest chainmail enthusiast went straight for the top, challenging Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship a couple of months into his return. The two men's second encounter for the gold came at No Way Out 2003, and, well, it was pants. Among a litany of botches, it was also just plain boring. Steiner could do very little, and the match lacked a single shred of credibility as Triple H tried and failed to convincingly sell for him. In the end, a pedigree felled the challenger, and this monstrosity was over. It didn't help that fans were booing Scott throughout the whole thing. Was this because they were in Canada, aka Bizarro World, or was it because, number 2, Scott Steiner versus Triple H at Royal Rumble? Just 1 month before putting on one of the worst World Heavyweight Championship matches in history, Scott Steiner and Triple H had another of the worst World Heavyweight Championship matches in history. Their first encounter was not helped by the fact that Steiner was working through a foot injury, which severely hampered his abilities. However, as we saw at No Way Out when he was healthy, it clearly wasn't holding him back all that much. The challenger also appeared out of ring shape throughout the contest, often taking time to pause and catch his breath. Sadly, they hadn't learnt this lesson by the Rumble, so fans were forced to sit through a puffed-up behemoth with a bad wheel, aimlessly chucking the game around as the boos grew louder and louder. Why WWE decided to give Scott another chance at the gold after this disaster is beyond me, but at least he had improved slightly by No Way Out. Still, that improvement didn't mean that he was any good, and it definitely didn't wash the taste of this turd smoothie out of everybody's mouths. Number 1, Mr. McMahon vs. Stephanie McMahon at No Mercy. Vince McMahon facing his own son at WrestleMania was one thing, but him taking on his daughter in a brutal I Quit match on pay-per-view crosses a whole bunch of lines. It's like a family therapist's dream and nightmare all rolled into one. After growing tired of his daughter stepping out of line, Vince did the unthinkable and made the challenge to Steph for this battle at No Mercy. Over the course of 10 minutes, viewers watched on in abject horror as a middle-aged multi-millionaire assaulted his own flesh and blood for our supposed entertainment. Even removing the disturbing optics of an older man choking out a younger woman with a lead pipe, this match was totally unnecessary. McMahon's self-indulgence, gratuitous intergender violence, a nonsensical storyline surrounding it, this match had it all and was an absolute shoo-in for the top of this list.